I think what Bill Graham and a lot of other people of his generation heard or got from the Latin music thing, I think it was sex. Sexual freedom had not yet come to America, and most people who were young were not having sex, okay? So, when you danced with somebody, wow.
Expatriate Jewish immigrants in the United States had nothing to dance to. You turn on the radio of the 40s and 50s, and it just couldn't be more alien to the experience they had come from.
How much is that doggy in the window? The one with the waggly tail.
Gentile music. But the Latin music, that wasn't Gentile music. That was soul music, and I think that they could really relate to it.
The ongoing fusion of jazz and Latin music found a comfortable home at the Palladium as well. Located near the New York jazz clubs, the ballroom attracted the leading players of the day. Soon, movie stars began making the scene. The Palladium had become a hipster's paradise.
But the Palladium had one rule. They didn't care what color you were, they didn't care how old you were, they didn't care how fat you were, but you had to be able to dance.
The best of the Palladium dancers developed professional careers. Millie Donay, an Italian-American, and Pedro Cuban Pete Aguilar, a New York Puerto Rican, set the standard. Cuban Pete's mambo evolved over time, shaped by friendships with the musicians and invented in collaboration with Donay. She died in 2007.
She taught me all life. I used to fight with her on the floor, and they came out to be steps. I tripped once and fell. You know what Millie said to me? Do it again. That was great. Do it again. I said, okay. She was the best. Really. She was the best.
Another team used the Palladium as a stepping stone to a career that lasted decades. Agustin Augie Rodriguez at first only watched.
I used to study dance as Cuban Pete was the best. And I did 6 months of just looking and trying to study. Dad, what? I felt it, but...
He also kept an eye on a young Puerto Rican from East Harlem, Margot Bartolome.
I used to try to be the first guy to go there. 20 guys were on her already, and she danced with them. She looked great, great tits.
They finally met after Margot's sister approached her to enter a dance contest with Augie.
And we went in and we won the contest. First time we ever danced together. Of course, we weren't professional, we weren't trained, but we had it.
Bitten by the dance bug, they applied to schools on scholarship, which soon transformed their mambo.
We went to school, dance school, and whatever we learned that day, we used to come in and put it into the mambo.
Valens.
Unknowingly, we were creating a style.
Beep, 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 beep. 1, 2, 3.
And we were the first ones really to put in turn, slides, and tricks into the mambo. I used to spin.
Ooh, she'd go down to the floor.
We always had to end with that.
Augie and Margot weren't the only ones riding the Latin dance wave of the 50s to success. Broadway and Hollywood turned mambo and escalating ethnic tensions into the hit West Side Story. Post-war New York now held over 500,000 Puerto Ricans, many newly arrived.
I'll get a terrace apartment.
The musical transformed their hopes and struggles into song.
Life can be bright in America.
If you can fight in America.
Life is alright in America.
If you're all white in America.
Others sought to repackage the craze for Main Street USA.
Even the records say, what the heck is the mambo? And we know from your letters that you would like to learn the mambo if it didn't take too long and you could do it at home. Well, my husband says that he can teach you the foundation step of the dance in less than a minute. So here is your teacher, Arthur Murray.
As the mambo began to fade, Perez Prado came through with another #1 hit, Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White. For many, it was the introduction to the new, easier Cuban dance, the cha-cha-cha.
The cha-cha-cha was really popular, especially with younger audiences, because it was at a slower tempo. So it was easier to dance to.
And the cha-cha, if you think about the dance stuff, is actually the idiot's dance because it's easiest to learn.
Ooh, we're gonna do the cha-cha. And the people, you know, that's what they're
The
selling.
cha-cha was easier.
Cha-cha was easy.
The cha-cha-cha broadened Latin music's appeal. So did a new television show, I Love Lucy, starring Cuban singer and bandleader Desi Arnaz and his wife Lucille Ball. Before its debut, the two had to convince network executives that the U.S. was ready to accept the premise, a cross-cultural marriage between a Cuban man and an American woman. Top ratings proved them right.
That means that I love you.
But the U.S.'s love affair in the 50s with all things Latin was not to last.
Several things happened to force the decline of the music, the culture, and the main thing was that Cuba was taken over by Fidel Castro, and the source of the music was cut off.
The doors to Cuba slammed shut. And they slammed shut psychologically and politically in the United States. Cuban music, Latin music, all of a sudden became the music of Castro and the Cuban Revolution and the communists.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
One of the worst things that could happen to the Latin music industry was the Beatles and the popularity of rock and roll in the mid-1960s, because really that captured the youth in the United States and in the Caribbean for that matter.
I loved my rock and roll. I loved the Beatles. I was affected by all of that. The 60s, with the advent of rock and roll, R&B, changed the music scene even in East Harlem, because now you have a third generation that's coming up. They're coming up in the projects. Now this is my generation. And they're much more English speaking than their predecessors.
At that time, you know, I could sit down and start listening to rock and roll, as good as it was, because I liked the rhythm patterns, the drums, especially all the things they did. But you know, musically, we're talking about music, saxes, trumpets, this and that, and the brightness and soft and loud. And
Here are the Beatles.
I'm not talking about popularity and playing a concert with 60,000 people. You know, we never were able to do that.
Ironically, many early rock songs like Twist and Shout, covered by the Beatles, contain Latin influences in their chord progressions, bass lines, and rhythms. They were the works of songwriters and producers in New York in the Brill Building, located just 4 blocks away from the Palladium. Many were mambo nicks, like Doc Thomas and Mort Shulman, who wrote hits for the Drifters, including Save the Last Dance for Me.
But don't forget who's taking you home.
Thomas would call their work Jewish Latin.
So darling, save the last dance for me.
The influence of the Latin music on rock and roll was seminal. Seminal. Latin music was everywhere. It was universal for us growing up in the 50s. And naturally, when the musicians then turned to the recording industry and started writing songs, producing records, and so forth, people started making music that they'd heard all their lives, which became the Latin influence on rock and roll, and particularly on pop music.
Other classic songs have a direct lineage from Latin music, like Louie Louie. It was the Kingsmen's version of an R&B record, which in turn was based on a cha-cha-cha, written by Cuban René Toussaint. The riffs and rhythms of Latin music became part of the rock arsenal. 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. Compare the Beatles' Day Tripper. With this Machito record from the 40s. Or Caramelos, a Cuban hit from 1960. With the Young Rascals' Good Lovin'.
1, 2, 3, good love.
When the records came out with the Cuban or the Latin influence in them, the people had no idea what they were hearing. They'd never heard it before. They just loved it.
Latin sounds disappeared into the mix that created rock, but not for long. Far away from New York's Latin scene, a blues rock group would take a Latin sound international. In the psychedelic years of the 60s, the most influential rock venue in San Francisco was the Fillmore, run by former mambo-nick Bill Graham. Graham ran his ballroom with a specific model in mind.
The Fillmore is, and then all the psychedelic ballrooms, because they all take their cue from the Fillmore. The Fillmore is Bill Graham's recreation of the Palladium circa 1953 in Manhattan. Crystal mirror ball turning with the lights going in all directions, and people perceiving that in a manner they hadn't in the Palladium. Bands playing and improvising and extending their sets. People dancing. I mean, you know, they were freak dancing, but they danced. Bill always wanted everybody who came to the Fillmore to dance.
He had also taken an interest in a young local guitarist, a kid he'd first met trying to sneak into the Fillmore. His name was Carlos Santana. Santana was born in Mexico, the son of a mariachi violin player. He too played violin himself as a boy, on the streets of Tijuana for change, as well as with his father in local bars.
It was one night where we were in the lowest part of Tijuana, you know, the smell like puke and vomit and piss in this whore joint. I mean, the cheapest whores. Makes my stomach sick just to think about it. And we were playing this music, and I started crying, part crying and part anger, because I didn't want to be there. So my father said to me, "What's the matter?" And I says, "I don't want to play this music, and I don't want to be here. I know that you need me to help you to pay the rent. But I can't stand this smell, and I can't stand these people, and I can't stand this music. It's just, you know, it's making me sick to my stomach." So he said to me, so what do you like? That American crap music, which is like